podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Claudia Day, and in this new series, I'm delighted to introduce you to expert coaches and thought leaders who share their passion for generating self-awareness through insight tools. Our aim is to inspire and explore with you some of the most impactful tools available to us coaches and leaders. Hi everyone, I'm super excited about today's episode. Until now, we've been looking at different tools to gain awareness, mainly as an individual. And of course, today we will move into a team perspective. How may it impact a team that an individual works on a tool, or how it may impact a team if we work and aggregate all the data from individual assessments to understand a team better or help the team function better. And then finally, how to assess the team as an identity. And today we have with us Kimberly Lewis Parsons, who is a team coach. She has 17 years of experience in coaching, 20 years of corporate experience, 8 years of teaching experience at Georgetown University, and more. And she will be with us today sharing about this important topic. Hi, Kimberly.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Can you please share with the audience a bit more about your journey and what got you to where you are today?
Yes. As you stated in my introduction, I primarily consider myself to be a team coach. So I am really in the space of executive team effectiveness. And I'll give you the short story of my journey to get here. I started out my career as a technologist. So my undergrad degree, my master's degree is in computer information systems. And I thought that was like the path for me. So I was a leader in technology in a Fortune 200 bank. And as a part of continual development and growth, I was nominated to go through a leadership development program for women leaders in tech. And I'll spare you all of the transformational things that happened in the program. But needless to say, after a year of coaching in this program, I came out with a desire to really do what I call a hard right turn in my career and have people be my widget as opposed to zeros and ones being my widget. I really came out with this shifted view and purpose to really develop leaders and develop teams and organizations. So that sent me on a journey to get my coaching certification. So I got my executive coaching certification from Georgetown University. And from there, when I went through Georgetown, I was exposed to team coaching as a specialty area of coaching. And I knew, Claudia, going through that experience, that I was like, yes, team coaching is a space that I really want to go deep in and become expert, really develop my expertise in that space. And I've been on this learning journey around how teams work, how organizations work, the system view of thinking about teams and organizations, the power of leadership teams and how they work, how it has an impact on the entire organization. So that has been my 15, 17-year journey, is digging deep in that space. And that led me to founding my company, Bamboo Teaming, where we really specialize in team effectiveness at the executive levels of organization and really coming in and doing this work to help leadership teams work better together with more ease, with more coherence, so that they can collaborate and deliver results. And also, what happens at the top cascades down to the entire organization. So that's like our space where we're really finding energy and having an impact.
Thanks for sharing with us your journey. It's coming from technology so different, but I guess technology is now everywhere. So a very useful background. And then, of course, team coaching has become so relevant as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. And for what you are about to share, which I'm excited that you could come and talk to us, because as I mentioned, we've been covering through the series some of the tools that you can use for improving our awareness or increasing our awareness as individuals. And of course, this has an impact on a team. And so in your experience, how would you translate this to then a team setting?
Yeah, good. So as I was thinking about the invitation to come and talk about this topic, I was really thinking about three ways that I really think about using assessments in teams. And so today, I think we'll dig into two of the three ways more deeply. But when I think about three viewpoints of how might I use assessments in the work that I do with teams, I think there's this first way, which is what I'm calling it's the me view. So how does my assessment that maybe I've been able to take advantage of, how does that assessment affect how I interact with others on a team? So that's the me view. And this space, this lives in the realm of what I would call emotional intelligence, right? When I do this individual assessment, it gives me more knowledge about myself. It helps me to know how to regulate myself, adapt myself as I am engaging with other people on the team. So that's the me view. And I know your previous episodes will have talked about that. So I'm not going to go into that deeply. But then I think there's like this next kind of level, right? Which is really the us view. That's what I'm calling it. So that's really the aggregate view of our profiles. What does the aggregate view of looking at our profiles from our assessments really reveal about our strengths, our preferences, and our tendencies as a team? And we'll get more into that. That's playing in a realm of what I would call social intelligence. And then the third viewpoint is really the team view. And we'll double click here. So how does the team function as an entity and really bringing in assessments that take a look at that? So there's the me view of using those assessments, there's the us view, and then there's the team view.
Yeah, the structure helps to put it in perspective and in some way to dig into it and try and understand how it can all play a function in the development of the people in a company. I guess the first one would be just because of, we did cover emotional intelligence in the other episodes lightly, but we do have an episode going deeper in it. And it's nice to hear when things get repeated in some way, how different experts view it. We have the combined view, of course, which is the aggregate view, and how you may use one of these individual assessments applied to different team members and then aggregate it into having some meaning for the team and for the team to then be able to work with them. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience with this?
This is often a common approach when clients approach us and they're like, hey, can we do an offsite or do a retreat where we really bring in these personality assessments or these work style assessments? And so this us, what I'm calling the us view, is where we really take the approach of bringing in the individual's assessments and really rolling those up to this aggregate view of how do our individual profiles really combine, aggregate into the picture of our predominant strengths, preferences, or tendencies within the team. Let me give a metaphor. I was thinking about this as this view is really when you use assessments. It can be like when you take a deck of cards, you're maybe playing a card game and you deal out cards to people. And so now you have this deck of cards, you have your hand of cards. And so you have these individual cards, but they form your hand and you're really looking at trying to understand the interplay of how all the cards work together. What does it really mean? What does an ace, what does a jack, et cetera, really mean in this viewpoint of the team? So when we take this perspective of looking at this aggregate view, we're really coming at it from the perspective of how is social intelligence, right? How do we read each other? How do we empathize with each other more? How do we interact with one another in relationship for the sake of growing one another, really getting the best use out of each other's strengths, preferences, tendencies? How do we influence one another, knowing what each person or each card is bringing to our hand? How do we inspire one another? How do we proactively manage and resolve conflict? And then how do we use this hand that we've been dealt to drive results more effectively? So it really is about taking that viewpoint of the individuals and how we all come together and what's now in our hand. How can we play this hand most effectively for us? So the bottom line is when we take this aggregate view of assessments that each person has taken, when we take a team through this, we're really looking to create a space for a better knowledge of each other as a team so that we can work more effectively and we can really leverage the strengths from each other. And just a note on some familiar types of assessments that you may have already talked about or that people typically bring to the table. There's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, Clifton Strengths, there's Hogan Personality Inventory. My firm, we personally like to use Personalysis Assessment. So that's one that we often will use to really get this aggregate view of individuals and how individuals play together with their strengths.
Can you share with us an example of a time where you applied one of these tests and how it played out, and so that the audience gets a bit of a sneak peek, so to say, or a window into what a team can do with one or several of these assessments combined together?
Yes, like I just mentioned, we really use Personalysis as one of the assessments that we often will use with teams. And one of the things we like about Personalysis is that it gives you viewpoints in 3 different areas, right? It really helps the teams that we work with to understand what does each person need in order to work at their best? Like, what is their intrinsic motivation that they have to satisfy? And then how does that then translate to the way that they're going to interact with each other? And we have found that's really useful for people to be like, if I am trying to make a decision or I'm trying to learn some information, or if I'm going to a place of really trying to create safety, figure out risk, navigate change, navigate complexity, I will show up this way in the team. And so that really creates like that empathy. Personalysis also gives you a viewpoint into communication styles and how people have been socialized to communicate with others and how they expect for people to communicate with them. And so we find that having that conversation with teams around the differences that they have in their expectations for communicating and relating to one another, it helps teams to take it from the feelings of personal respect or disrespect from another person to really like this awareness of, oh, I get it. I get where you're coming from. For example, Claudia, using Personalysis, I am very direct in my communication, and Personalysis has another profile type that would be taken aback by that direct communication style. So being able to have that conversation in the team really helps people to take it from like this personal affront or not to really understanding each other's styles. When we work with teams with Personalysis, another thing we like about it is it really helps people to understand what energizes people at work. What are those assignments that when they get to work on a certain type of assignment or bring certain preferences to the table, they're going to find more energy from those things and thus be more productive, be more effective in how they're working. And so it's by creating this shared understanding and shared language in the team around people's preferences, tendencies, different situations, and how those different situations turn on people. Like it just creates so much more empathy and perspective and awareness in the team. And one of the things that we talk about when we're with teams is it's a dance that you're doing, right? Like what are understanding the dance moves that I'm bringing to the table, the dance moves that you're bringing to the table, and then how do we need to compromise? How do we need to complement? How do we need to care for each other so that we can have the best team possible?
You would, of course, hope that the team has a lot of trust and that they can share all of this openly and that magically you can start right with the analysis. However, in reality, there is a safety creation that needs to happen. So in your experience, how do you go about that process before going into the tool directly?
I actually love that you're asking me this question because it was thinking about one of the things for us as coaches when we are bringing in assessments is to really understand like where is the team in terms of their development and what's the level of safety, trust within the team. And when I say development, meaning are they a new team? Are they forming? Have they been together and they're in storming? Are they norming? Are they performing, etc.? So really understanding the stage of development of the team is important, as well as the levels of safety and trust to determine what is actually going to be the best assessment to bring into the team. And also to your question, I find that a starting point of doing a shared assessments and debrief with the team can actually help to build trust within the team. So you can really leverage this as a way to start to create and increase the levels of trust and cohesion within the team. Now, I will say, Claudia, if you're going into a team that has very low, comparatively, like low amounts of trust and safety, this is where I'd go back to maybe the me view, that first view that I was talking about of really helping people like use that as the starting point to help people understand themselves, their triggers, and doing that from an individual perspective first before you really bring in something that they're going to do together as a team.
And in terms of managing the leader, so you have, of course, the leader and you have the team members, and then there's work that you do with everyone together in the team. Then there's work you do with the leader. There's also work that you can do with individuals within the team. What distinction or what do you do differently when using these tools with a leader?
I think if I take it back to just really thinking about what I'm using with the leader, one of the things that is important, and this could almost be considered a watch out for us as coaches, is that we are clear with the team members that are doing the assessments, how their data will be used with the leader. I think, especially when we're talking about this realm of trust, like making sure that when we are administering these profiles, these assessments that we're doing, that we're also being really transparent and clear about how that information will be used, especially if we're doing it for the sake of giving the leader the data and not sharing back or delaying our share of that information back to the team. And then, of course, right, once we're clear about our transparency on how we'll use the data, we get this aggregate information and provide this, like it can actually be like really ripe coaching for the leader. So we bring in, of course, like all of our great coaching skills with the leader one-on-one to really help them to understand how they may be interacting well or where there may be opportunities for growth with those on a team, et cetera. So I really see it as enhancing like your one-on-one coaching with the leader to help that person relate more effectively with those on the team. But again, when you're using it just with the leader, like I would put that still in the space of the me view of how do you help that leader understand so that the leader can be more effective in how they're engaging.
Yeah, you mentioned, of course, the watch outs. And one of the big ones is pigeonholing, where there might be the risk of someone being labeled or something specific, and these tests making that or bringing to the light something and then people using that. There is also, of course, I want to be promoted, but maybe something in my profile doesn't really stand out for me to be promoted, or all those fears and things to think about. So can you tell the audience a bit more about how you think about this or how you go about this in your coaching?
Yeah, of course, there are many, but I would call out for our purposes 3 watch outs for coaches as we're using these assessments from this us view, this aggregate view, bringing it into a team. So I'm really taking a posture of what are some watch outs when you're facilitating assessments, debriefs, synthesis of this information in a group. So one of those would be building on what you just said, Claudia. One of them is watching out for team members walking away, labeling each other based on the nuances of whatever that particular assessment is. So our brain naturally wants to simplify and categorize. Simplify it, categorize the data so that it can create those shortcuts to work more efficiently. And this is what we do with assessments. And for example, if it's an assessment that uses colors, maybe it's 5 colors, that person is 1 color. That's what I see. That's the emphasis. Or those assessments that use maybe different words, that person is just the combination of this word, right? And so our brain is naturally doing this. And the watch out here is that knowing that is the way we enter in and really think about it as a coach, realizing that this can simplify the complexity of human beings. And it can actually create like a disservice within the team of having people really move beyond like the nuances, the complexity, the different ways that people show up. I always like to tell teams when I'm working with them, this is a man-made tool that's trying to categorize a complex human being and take it with a grain of salt. Yes, it's based in different theories, etc., but human beings are divinely created. Don't just take it as truth. And that's what these labels, when we do that with one another, that's the way that we actually can start to create disservice within a team. So as coaches, really remembering and creating a space for teams to say, this isn't always true. People are just expressed in different forms to different degrees so that it doesn't come across as dismissive or worse. We don't create a space within a team where team members see someone according to their profile and the other person actually perceives that as like flat out wrong. For example, how many times have you heard when people use a certain profile, I'm an ABCD, and the other person's, I'm a WXYZ, and now it becomes like this shorthanded label. And I'm like, I'm not sure I really relate to that. So from a watch out for us as coaches, like what do we then do to help mitigate this labeling that could happen is when we're facilitating these conversations, making sure that we're creating space for the team to talk about this doesn't resonate with me, and here's what I would add, or here's how I would shift, or here's what actually does resonate more with me. So making sure you create that airtime for the team to talk about that. I also think as a coach, when you're using assessments within a team, you really have your sensitivity up for the labeling that you will start to see occurring as you're debriefing so that you can actually call that out and then redirect. And then the last thing I would say is as a coach, especially like when you're working with the leader or you're going back and having conversations with individuals, is to encourage people to start from this place of this assessment can give me a good starting point. It's my best guess looking at what's on this sheet of paper and then saying, how could I be wrong? Entering into conversations and interacting with others on the team from a space of, I might be wrong. So let me be curious and open to what reality is and having that conversation. Does that make sense?
What I was thinking while you were saying that is that, of course, in a daily life, we're very busy with our task and everything we have to do. And there are things that land in a certain way and things, and using these assessments, any of them, also gives that with the right time to do it. It gives that space, as you said, that airtime to really talk about these things that wouldn't otherwise be surfaced and would just be shoved down. So in some way, if used cautiously and everything, of course, giving that airtime and that time for conversation, and with a coach being a facilitator, it feels they can work around them. In your experience, making the leader aware of these watch outs, how do they respond to them, or how does it impact to make them aware of it? Or do you just yourself stay aware of them without mentioning it to the leader?
No, I absolutely think you are in partnership with the leader of the team when you are using assessments, bringing them in. And it's a part of what I feel is our roles as like experts in this space, like bringing our expertise to the table to make sure that we are having those conversations to prepare the leader, to help them be advocates in promoting good behavior, good use of the assessments when we're actually in those sessions. And it'll also be your leader becomes the champion and advocate for good behavior and using those assessments as a team once they leave, like whatever that debrief session is that they're having with you. And let me give you another watch out that I had on the table because it really relates to using the leader as like your partner and champion. Another watch out for coaches is making sure that we are caring for what I would call like the marginalized voice or the outliers on the team when we do these types of assessments, right? So when we come in and we do this aggregate view, this us view, what often happens is you start to see, if you were thinking about a heat map, you start to see like where is the highest concentration of work styles and preferences and strengths and nuances for this particular team in this heat map view. And then you can start to see like where are the outliers, right? Like where are the people who they don't fit, quote unquote, fit within the predominant weight or heat within this team. And so that for me as a coach using assessments in this way is really important to pay attention to, because the likelihood when you see that is that the people who are outliers in the predominance of the team may actually be suffering from having their voices marginalized, having their strengths marginalized. They may actually very somatically feel the difference that they bring to the table from where the predominant weight of personalities, preferences, and strengths are within the team. And so going into a session where you're using these assessments, you're walking a team through so that they can understand, that is something for you as the coach to be very aware of. Because what I have seen happen is you go in and the people who are the outliers, the others may start to gang up on the other person, or the outlier becomes the butt of the joke, right? Oh, that explains why we don't want to listen to X, Y, and Z. They're completely off in left field from the team. And so you have to be really careful that you are preparing for that. And a part of the preparation, Claudia, when I really see like outliers before going into these sessions, is having that prep conversation with the leader and explaining to them, this may actually be a case. We really want to check in on how this person may or may not feel included, not included, marginalized, not marginalized within the team because they are outside of the team's norm. So as a coach, like what I would say for us is to really design the session in a way where we are giving space to highlight the gifts of those that are outside the norm, really giving them space in the activities we design and debrief, the way that we handle the debrief, to bring those voices into the room. How does it feel being on the team and maybe you are not in the same profile? Really giving the opportunity for the team to reflect on what is the value that we get as a team. How does this person or people that are outside of our norm really bring value to the table? How are we leveraging their uniqueness, their strength? How are we using them to be a contrarian voice that really brings value to us? So really working with the leader so that the leader can also do that in the session.
And of course, this last bit that you said, nowadays we have studies that show the importance of diversity and the value that can bring. So using that as a reliance or as part of that discussion. Thank you for that. The other one we, of course, want to understand is how to use these assessments to understand the team's identity as such, rather than the individual's identity by themselves. So in your experience, how have you best done this with your teams?
This third view that we're talking about, the team view, I love to play in this space, of course, where it's really taking the approach of using assessments to assess the team as what I would call as the third entity. So let me talk about the third entity for a moment. So the third entity is really my awareness of really thinking about the team as third entity. It's based on the concepts from CRR Global's perspective for organization and relationship systems coaching. And this concept of the third entity is really about seeing the relationship of the individuals involved in that team as forming to create this unique identity with its own wisdom beyond the individual contributions of the team members. And so let me give you another metaphor. So if you think about, we plan to make a cake. So you go to the store, you buy the individual ingredients, you put those ingredients in the basket. When we were talking about the us view, that's really like where you're taking those individual ingredients and looking at their components, their nutrients. What do we actually have in this basket? This team view is really when you bake those ingredients together, they become a cake. And you don't talk about a cake as, Claudia, I'm giving you this 2 cups of flour, 3 eggs, a cup of sugar, a stick of butter. Like, you don't talk about a cake like that. It is now a completely different thing. It's a cake. And so assessments from this perspective, the team view of assessments is really holding the team out front. It is now a cake.
A velvet cake or a chocolate cake, or I know I'm thinking of all these flavors.
And so it's thinking about the team, holding the team itself out as now this new entity. And then how do we assess, really look at how the team functions? What are the strengths of this entity of the team? What's the collective identity of the team? What are the ways that the team functions well? Where are those opportunities for growth with the team? How do people see the team in the broader ecosystem, right? Because they're looking at the cake. They're not looking at team member 1, team member 2, team member 3, team member 4.
That metaphor is lovely. It works in so many levels.
Yes. So this perspective, this team view is really what are those assessments that really are looking at the functioning of the team as third entity. And this really is drawing from what CRR Global would call relationship intelligence, right? And so there are several assessments that are out there to really view the team as third entity. Some that you might know that are top of mind: 5 dysfunctions of a team. Team Coaching International has the TCI, Team Diagnostic. 16 conditions, they have the Team Diagnostic Survey. In my firm in particular, we really like to use team management systems, or you'll hear it referred to as TMS or TMP. We also like to use Bright from the leadership assessment, and we have our own proprietary process as well that is interview-based, where we do what we call team landscape mapping. And so this is really taking all those voices from the entire team to tell the story about the team itself. What's working, what's not working, what are our opportunities, what are our strengths, what is this unique identity of the team? We're really talking about the cake, not how I do, how you do, what we do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because of time. We don't have time, of course, to go through all of them, but we would have time to explore, or for you to bring to light one of them. So I'll let you choose your favorite or you go-to one, the one you use the most out of that list.
Besides our proprietary process that we use to map the landscape, if I was talking about off the shelf, we use 2 that are off the shelf. So we like to use team management systems, so the TMP, TMS. And one of the reasons why we like this particular tool is because it gives you both. It straddles the fence between what we were talking about on that second level of the us view of us as team, because it brings in people's individual preferences and work styles at work. And it then talks about what are the 8 purposes or functions that a team, doesn't matter what team, these are the 8 functions that show up in any team. And then it provides a mapping of how your team comes together to deliver against those 8 functions. So it's giving you a little bit of both, which is one of the reasons why we like TMS. And then with Bright from the leadership circle, Bright is full on, we are talking about team as third entity. And they go straight to team as third entity. So those would be the 2 off the shelf types of assessments that we tend to use and gravitate to.
I wonder if there's a chance that you can, through an example or through a case study, share a bit more about what these 8 categories are and a bit more information about how you've used them.
Yes, TMS, their particular profile is called the Team Management Profile. So you will also hear it referred to as TMP. That is the specific profile in and of itself. And one of the ways that we use this with teams is we really, when we're doing this with teams, we break it up into 2 threads of the conversation, if you will. The first thread of the conversation is we're really walking the team through their individual work styles and preferences that they are bringing to the table. So again, this is one of the reasons why it gives you both and. And so we use that to help people, all the things that we just talked about in the us view is right, really creating that empathy, really understanding where another person is coming from, understanding where our individual strengths we can amplify those so that we work together, we collaborate more effectively, we are proactively heading off conflict, or how do we actually want to navigate conflict when it arises, interpersonal conflict between each other. But then from there, TMP gives us insight into here are the 8 functions. Their research is based on what are the 8 functions that high-performing teams across the globe that are universal. A team needs these 8 functions in order to be most effective within a team. And so we walk them through, here are the 8 functions. We help the teams that we use this with understand those 8 functions. And then it overlays based on the work styles, the preferences within this team. Which of these functions are you all fulfilling most effectively as a team? So from there, it then opens up interesting conversation, right, around what are our strengths as a team? When we're working on projects and initiatives, where will we pay more attention to the types of functions that need to happen? Where do we have blind spots related to the types of functions that need to happen? So for example, does this team really bring in the functions around moving things from idea to concrete deliverable, concrete product? Or is this a team where we have more weight or preference in the types of work in a team that are based on selling our ideas, creating ideas, innovating, going and talking to others outside of our team about our ideas? Or is this a team where maybe we're not the innovating type of team? We don't have a lot of innovators on the team. Maybe we don't have a lot of producers, people who are actually creating that, translating that idea to thought. But this is really a team that we have a preference around the functions related to measuring, going back and doing quality assurance. So it can really help the team to get that clear picture of the 8 functions that what TMP would say are needed in a team, do we have available to us, and where might we need to go and get more of, or lean more into that space with specific behaviors and practices that we define as a team.
Similar as we spoke about watchouts with the combined view, with this more focused view on the team as an identity, what would be the watchouts that you would advise a coach to really focus on?
So I have 3 things to pay attention to here. And I'll voice it more as like a benefit that this level can bring, and then a watch out based on that benefit. So the first one is a benefit for using this level team assessment is it gives voice to the entire team to tell the story of what's working and not working, what's function, where the team has strength, where the team doesn't have strength. And I really love the beauty that this type of team assessment, it's not one person's perspective. You really get what's happening on the ground, if you will. It gives the team a space to really understand itself and how they're functioning. One of the watchouts, Claudia, that I've seen from this, and I play with this in both ways, is a watch out is giving the team enough time to really understand themselves as a unique identity before actually bringing in other people's perspective. Because one thing we will do is we'll do a stakeholder perspective. So we'll get other people to tell us how they see the entity of the team. And what I found is that if you bring in that stakeholder perspective, the team's energy and focus goes on what other people say about them, as opposed to what do we say about us as a team. So my practice is to withhold like that stakeholder view until the team has really had a chance to understand its unique identity, how they are functioning together as a team. I will say another benefit to using this level of assessment is it brings in the reality on the ground, again, from the perspective of the team, as opposed to really leaning on maybe what the leader says about the team, or maybe what the sponsor that brought you in says about the team. But using this can really give you that holistic view with all the voices on the table of how we're working well, how we're not working well, where there might be gaps in our functioning as a team, and where our strengths are. The watch out that I would say for coaches related to this is to be prepared that sometimes you will find contradiction in what the leader says is the reality of the team, or the sponsor says is the reality of the team, versus what the team actually says about themselves. And so being prepared to have that conversation with the leader, especially before you go into the session, is so useful so that you can prepare the leader And if you're doing anything when you're reviewing your team assessment, where maybe the team is going to choose what they focus on to grow and to develop and to put more practice into place with them, if it is different from the leader, like really having a prep conversation with the leader about how will you all decide, right? Are you willing to submit your perspective of what you think is the right place for us to focus on to what the team, holistically, the third entity of the team says, or the leader comes in and says, yes, I get it. And I hear this is the picture on the ground. And this is the way that I want us to focus our attention, right? So you need to make sure you're managing that conversation. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of benefit of using this type of assessment is it helps to have the team really think about what are our strengths and what are our opportunities, how we're functioning well and where we're not functioning well as a system, not as one or two people who are labeled as the trouble starters or the disruptors in the system. So really thinking about this level of assessment can help the team to say, the system of our team is allowing this to happen, or it's not allowing this to happen, as opposed to it takes away like that blame or that pointing of fingers at one or two people for what we might call dysfunction or ways that we're not working well, to really make it a system view of what are the practices that are in place that are enabling us to function well, what are those practices not in place, or what are we allowing to be here. It helps to neutralize attributing too much weight to one or two individuals for a team's functioning. So a watch out as a coach is making sure that like you're really helping the team to elevate the conversation from the one or two people that are quote unquote labeled as like the disruptors or the people that are bringing a dysfunction to the team to what is happening at a system level and holding the space for that conversation to happen. And also another thing that I love, especially bringing in this perspective of third entity, is that it really helps us as coaches to ask the question of what is the system trying to express? What is the need that maybe the person that has the quote unquote disruptive voice, there is something in the system that needs to be addressed that is coming up emergent from that voice. So those are just a few things to think about when you're using assessments at the team level.
Thank you for that. Is there anything else, Kimberly, that you would like to share with the audience?
I think just in closing, the final thoughts I'd offer is just being really intentional about the level of assessments that you're bringing in. As we talked about before, just being really clear about what is the stage of development of this team, and based on stage of development, what might be the most useful type of assessment. And also, like you said before, how much trust is built into the team, and just being really transparent about how that information is used and making sure that the team has had conversations about how they want to use this knowledge that they now have about one another as they continue to interact beyond their session with you.
And this is, of course, a huge topic that is very difficult to cover in a podcast, but hopefully it does give an idea of getting started. And I think the concept of the 3 ways in which you can use assessments is very visual. And then for the coaches to decide how they're being used or how they will be used based on the needs or what the organization needs. Thank you so much. Where can the audience get in touch with you?
They can find me at Bamboo Teaming, and that is TEAMING, Bamboo Teaming, because teaming is a verb. We collaborate and relate to one another in order to drive tremendous results. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Kimberly Lewis Parsons. That's Kimberly, Ley, Lewis Parsons on LinkedIn. So I'm often dropping nuggets of teaming tidbits out on LinkedIn as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make sustainable differences to individuals, organizations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, member benefit interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching experience.